Thank you, Susan. I'm so happy to see your faces in person and anticipate your questions and participation from being online today. It's terrific that we get an opportunity now to continue the conversation about Holland's humble historic houses that we started maybe a couple of years ago when we were offered it before. Today will be a little different, updated, and we'll have a lot of fun. I first lived in a pretty old house in Holland, Michigan, which was the then parsonage of Third Reformed Church, which they tore down as soon as we left. Maybe that was my little brother's fault, but it wasn't mine. So where you see Third Reformed Church now, the big part, the area where you pull up for the buses and everybody, right near there was a house that was in between the church at that time and the parsonage. That was an old house. Later, my parents served the Reformed Church in New Paltz, New York. New Paltz, New York has a street called Huguenot Street, which is sometimes called the oldest street in America. Now, a lot of people were bragging about the oldest this, the biggest that, the first that, but anyway, on Huguenot Street. When they got to New Paltz, guess what? My father was the senior minister, but the former minister had not moved out of the parsonage yet. So they assigned my parents to this little house on Huguenot Street that was really old, like, I don't want to say 1600s, but certainly 1700s. And they loved it. I mean, I loved it. It wasn't the parsonage, and they eventually did get into the parsonage. But that little house was another very old house that I got to know and appreciate. Time goes by, and in 2007, while I was married to John DeVelder, who passed away in 2015, he first noticed a house in New Jersey that he was interested in. And when I saw it, I liked it too. It's rare that a married couple always like the same old house. A lot of times the woman loves it and the man thinks it's a money pit. But this is a picture of the house that we bought in a Dutch rich town called Millstone, New Jersey. You can pass this around. Millstone, New Jersey, that was built in 1795 by a savvy Dutch couple who thought it would be nice to have a government contract on the other side of the house. So they had a post office there. And so they built a post office and a house that were beautifully married, coordinated with each other. It wasn't a house tacked onto a post office, and it wasn't a post office tacked onto a house either. It was a real building. And today it still existed, had a store continuously from 1795 until we saw it in 2006. And so John and I both fell in love, not only with each other, but also with the house, which we bought in 2007. Did some renovations and lived there until he passed away in 2015, and I sold the house in 2018. Now in Holland, again, I own a house that's on the National Historic Register, and that house is also on the National Historic Register. So I came to appreciate what that means and what kind of community desire to preserve and maintain their beautiful buildings and still be realistic about what people need if they're going to live there with a family, to do that and to do it right. And so that's what our house is about today. Now, some people think that historic preservation is just for stuffy little old ladies that still put antimacassars on their upholstered furniture. But we know, first of all, we don't know any stuffy little old ladies, do we? I don't know a single one. And in Holland, that's not true. There are so many people in Holland seriously and emotionally involved in appreciating and trying to perpetuate the old houses that we have. Today on my historic register house, I'm planning to put a porch on it this spring. Now, you may have been told that you could never do anything to the exterior of an old house. Well, with the help of Amy Aldrich, I'm going to put a porch on my old house, so you can carefully pass this around too. And this is the architect's plan. An architecture student helped Amy to make the drawings for this. So this is his drawing. And it's especially good because he turned it into his professor of architecture at Notre Dame University. And he told me that on the windows of the architecture professors in the architecture school at Notre Dame, they have pictures of houses in Holland on their walls. That's how well known Holland is. It's not just we that are proud of our houses. They are being recognized as a very special accomplishment over the years of Holland in not only having those houses in the first place, but forming historic districts where there's a slightly better chance that they'll be properly handled and used. So yes, this porch will go on my house. Yes, you can sometimes modify a historic house. You have to meet standards, but if you meet the standards, then you can make well-planned additions. I just couldn't stick up a ticky-tacky porch on top of a beautiful house, but I don't want to do that anyway. So we're going to take a look at what is the National Historic Register with the help of Anna Minabo to first help us understand and figure out what is the National Historic Register, the State Historic Register, and the local historic districts. How do they interconnect and what are they? She's going to introduce that. And lucky Holland that now has a preservation, a person professionally trained in preservation to be on the staff of the city to help homeowners find preservation accessible, understandable, and friendly, to understand appropriate applications and how the national standards that come from this Department of Interior are translated down to the local level and applied to homeowners as they care for their houses. Then, Anna has graduated from the University of Michigan with a degree in American culture and anthropology. And she has a master's in art history and in history museum studies from Cooperstown graduate program at State University of New York College at Oneonta, New York. She has experience with historic preservation and has worked on historic buildings being nominated in Michigan and otherwise for the registers that exist at those levels. So she's helped have those juried and adjudicated with the judges on that. So she is able to share guidelines regarding design standards for historic districts and so forth as people do that. And she'll explain that as we go along. Amy Aldrink is the executive director of Home Corps. And for that, we need a little bit better understanding of what's going on in that. If you are not a stuffy little old lady, but you really do like to study these subjects, you're the kind of person who books up a book like this in a bookstore, even though you don't need any more books right now. So I'm going to pass this around because this is an area that people are interested in and books are being published. So just pass that around and see what level of information homeowners can find just in a bookstore. And then we'll have these books available out in the lounge area between now and next week. So if you want to look at them more, you want to stop in and just browse them a little bit, they'll be here. And I also have marked in these two books, which are Holland Sentinel publications about old time Holland, one going back really far and one kind of since the 50s. So I've marked some pages on which you can see what downtown Holland looked like way back and then in the 1950s, because today when we go downtown, it's just a wow, amazing downtown. And some newcomers may think it was always that way, but those of us who've been around know that Holland transformed its downtown in the 60s, in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, a tremendous amount of upgrade and transformation to honor the history of the buildings and even make them better than they might have ever been very often in the past, to transform the downtown. Once they had done that, local leaders like Gordon Van Wylen, the president of Hope College, yay, said that if we're going to improve the downtown and we're going to really upgrade the Hope College campus and keep them beautiful and architecturally respected, we also need to care for all the houses that are within walking distance of those two places and see to it that Holland does not suffer the downgrading or the forgetting about the smaller, especially the smaller, humbler houses that really are common in downtown. When those professors at Notre Dame put a picture on their wall of a house in Holland, it's probably a Foursquare. 1, 2, 3. When professors put up a picture, it's probably one of our famous Foursquare houses. It's just like a rectangle of a big house that has wonderful architecture, but nothing is goo-gaw or super decoration or a reminder of an Italian villa or an English mansion or what the English call a humble house, a country house. It just goes on and on and on, like something in Downton Abbey or something. So we'll have these two books out in the hallway too. And with that, I will let you now, Amy Aldring. I didn't finish telling you about Amy Aldring. She is the executive director of Home Corps, which was established a considerable amount of time ago. I don't know the exact year, but since 2000, Amy has been working with Home Corps. And so she has participated she is the builder, the licensed builder who plans and I would say directs the plans for each house as a committee of Home Corps works with her on exactly what they're going to do with each house. As you probably know, Home Corps is a 503c. It operates at a loss in order to pick a house that was the potential Cinderella, the dog of the neighborhood, and turn it into the best it could possibly be. I've actually heard Amy Aldrich say something like, I've never seen a house that I thought should be torn down. That's a frightening statement, but Amy has the eye that can see beyond some of the ramshackle stuff you're going to see on some of her pictures and see the house that's waiting there to be brought back. So now let's start with Anna Binable. Are we ready? All right. Thank you. And if you have questions, as Susan said, you can hold them for the end or put them in the chat, and we'll be handling them as we go. Not as we go along, but at the end. Do you need this, or is there a mic right here? Okay, Anna has her own microphone, so I guess
Everyone, we're just trying to get the microphone working. Okay, we're going to go ahead and switch to a handheld.
Okay, everybody can hear me now? Okay.
Everybody at home, I apologize. We were having a little bit of technical difficulties, and I'm seeing something on our screen that I've quite honestly never seen before in all my time. Oh, we're viewing someone else's screen. Okay, someone at home is sharing their screen, so give me a minute. Let me get on my host computer and I will unshare their screen. Now, you might ask yourself, why do we allow people to share their screen? Well, we do that so that our presenter can share her screen. And so if we eliminate that possibility, then she can't share her screen. So, good afternoon, folks. I'm going to hide her meeting controls, and this is going to be the best presentation ever. Totally. Okay, I'm going to test your advancement of her screen. There we go.
All right, thank you. We should be rocking and rolling now, right? Okay, well, as I was saying, my name is Anna, and I'm the preservation planner for the city of Holland. And in this role, I work with the folks who live in our historic districts, but also anyone who's interested in historic preservation in the city. I want to be a resource, someone who's there to help and answer any questions you might have about the historic homes in Holland and also their greater preservation. So my background is in museums. and specifically museum education and historic preservation. So talking with you today is an excellent sort of combination of the two, and I'm really excited to be here with you. As Linda mentioned, I do have experience working on National Register nomination processes. You might think this is a little bit of a funny picture up here, but this was me last winter measuring the foundation of a historic church in upstate New York that we were working on getting registered. It's the Hartwick Seminary Evangelical Lutheran Church, and it was accepted to the register this past fall. That's the smaller portrait of or picture of it right there. So that's just a little bit of some of the things I've done both out in the field, and most of what I do now is working from City Hall and talking to folks like all of you. So today I'm going to be talking about the different historic districts we have here in Holland, how they get established, and how you can be involved in historic preservation going forward. So in Holland, we have 3 different main types of designations. We have homes that are listed and buildings, individual properties listed on the National Register of Historic Places, the Michigan State Register of Historic Sites, and then also local historic districts. So I'm going to walk through what each of these mean. So the National Register of Historic Places is administered by the National Park Service, which I think is pretty cool. Their website says that this is an official list of the nation's historic places that are worthy of preservation. As of 2020, there were more than 96,000 properties on this register, and of those, nearly 2,000 were in Michigan. Holland itself has 7 individual locations that are individually listed, and then 2 districts that are on this register that overall contain 380 contributing properties. So you can see this has a pretty big presence, especially here in the central city area. Whoop. Make sure I'm following along with my notes here, right? So how does the listing process work for the National Register? Nominations are given by the State Historic Preservation Office, and this is often abbreviated as SHPO or SHPO. So private individuals such as homeowners, organizations, local governments, they are the ones who see what they'd like to preserve, and then they bring that to SHPO and work with them to complete this registration process. So every state has its own professional review board that's established that review the nominations that are brought forward to make sure that they're eligible to go forward towards the federal level. And in Michigan, this also plays into the state register process. So it's a series of steps that you have to take in order to get to that federal level, starting local, state, and then all the way up to national. On the corner of my slide here, I just have an image of the actual National Register form for the first historic district, or excuse me, the historic district addition in the city of Holland. So as I mentioned, we have those 2 districts. One of them was added to in 1990. So we've expanded our districts over time. And when you complete the form, that's where you do things like survey, taking photographs of the structure, researching the history, who lived there, why is it important, what are some of the important architectural features, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So what are some of the protections that come with being listed on the National Register? Well, actually, the National Register is primarily an honorary title that goes with a property. It says that this property is historic and worthy of preservation, but it does not have any protections per se on what can be done to that listed structure, including demolition. So that can be surprising to some folks. And again, that's why there's other types of listing that you can do to a property. There's not an oversight or review process if exterior modifications or changes want to be made unless federal money becomes involved. So this federal money could include funding or tax credit incentives, for example, or if the property is owned by the federal government itself. So if that happens, then the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation becomes involved, and they start something that's called a Section 106 review. Now that sounds pretty official, right? It's named after the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966, in which Section 106 says that federal agencies must consider the effects on historic properties of the surrounding historic properties and the historic property itself on any projects that they are involved in. So this is where some of those protections start to come in. During this process, the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, any interested parties, and then also the general public have the opportunity to weigh in on what they think about the project before it started. So this doesn't happen too often, again, because it has that federal tie to it, but it is a process that you might hear about as you dig more into historic preservation. So you might have heard me mention right there, federal income tax credits. That's one of the major incentives of being listed on the National Register. So properties that are listed that are also income producing, so that means they're involved in industry, commercial, agriculture, or for example, a rental property is a more common one. They are able to enter this program and apply to receive 20% back of substantial rehabilitation that they've done to their property as part of this tax credit process. So again, that rehabilitation must be considered substantial. And there's a certain formula that the federal government uses to figure this out. But largely it means that the cost of rehabilitation that you're putting into the property is worth more than what the property started as prior to that work starting. So this is big dollar amounts. Sometimes we'll usually see large commercial properties undertaking National Register designation in order to qualify for the benefits like this. I also want to take a moment here to talk about rehabilitation. That's a word I've used a couple of different times. And actually, Linda earlier was sort of providing a perfect definition of what it is. Rehabilitation is the process of making a historic property functional for use today while still preserving its defining historic characteristics. So for example, and this is how I should say the National Park Service recognizes that word, and that's how it's used in their standards and in their resources. So restoration, for example, is restoring a property to the way it looked at a specific time in the past. It's removing anything that didn't exist in this one time period you're trying to recreate. So for most people, especially the folks living in our historic districts, rehabilitation is their goal. They want to still live in this house, they want to enjoy this house, and they want the additional character of it being a historic home. So just going forward, that's kind of what that rehabilitation means. So I have a map here, and we may or may not have copies available later today of the different historic districts located in Holland. So I've outlined in red the 2 National Register historic districts. And don't worry about the other colors. We'll learn what all of them mean by the end of today. But these are the 2 areas that, again, fall under that designation. It's our larger residential Holland Historic District that was both originally established in 1983 and it added to in 1990. And then also our downtown historic district, which is the commercial area, 8th Street, right where we are right now. Between River and Columbia, those properties are on the National Register as well. So Holland also has a series of individually registered properties. So I've been talking primarily about districts. That's when groups of homes of buildings are combined together and nominated all together because the neighborhood, the environment that they create, that in itself is historic, but properties can also be nominated on an individual basis. So some of those in Holland include the Isaac Capon House, Pillar Church, the Settlers House, the Old City Hall and Firehouse number 2, Third Reformed Church, the Van Raalte House out on Van Raalte Farm, and then also the Deswan Windmill. So these are some of those individual properties, and some of them also fall into those larger districts, for example, the Capon House. So moving on to the State Register of Historic Sites. This has a little bit less to do with our historic districts, but I still think it's important to cover today because it's something you'll probably see around town. They're designated by those green and gold large cast iron signs that you see around. So the State Historic Preservation Office, SHPO, is the one who maintains this register. And as of right now, it's the Michigan History Center in Lansing that administers the Historic Marker Program. So one of the main reasons a property today is going to go for the State Register of Historic Sites is to qualify to have one of these signs. Of course, that's not required. You don't have to have a sign to be on the State Register of Historic Sites. So the State Register largely follows the same eligibility process of the National Register, and each state is responsible for running its own program. So I'm actually very impressed with Michigan's program. I think it's very robust. I'm sure all of you can think of multiple locations in Holland itself where these signs are located, and not every state is like that. So I think that's something really unique about our area and where we live. These signs also are a really great visual reminder and also, well, marker. It's a marker of history, where we live, and historic preservation. And they also help educate the public. They share information about the site. And so they're a really great way to spread more information about what this area was like in the past and how we can protect it going forward. And that's what I think is really neat about this program. Here I have a long list of where you can find all of these signs, or at least the state registered properties in Holland. I'll give you a moment to kind of look that over. Something that's interesting to know, especially if you're going to delve into this a little bit more, are the names that properties are registered or listed under. Sometimes they don't match the common name today because it's the historic use of the building, or since they've been registered to now, the names have changed. So for example, on the list here, the United States Post Office is actually the Holland Museum nowadays, right? And then the Kramer's House is currently the Centennial Inn on the corner of Central and 12th Street. So those are a couple of just the different name changes that have occurred over time. All right, now I'm going to move into local historic districts. So our local historic districts are established by local ordinances. These are basically kind of laws or the legal background as to how different parts of the city operates. So these local ordinances create the district boundaries. They decide where exactly are these lines going to be drawn, what homes are included and which ones are not. They also form a historic district commission. So the Historic District Commission, I work very closely with. It's 7 individuals who live in the city that are appointed into these roles. Their main job is to review all of the applications that come in from folks looking to do modifications, exterior changes to their properties. They're also involved with other parts of historic preservation in town, oftentimes brought in to sort of be in a consulting sort of way. They're all very knowledgeable on Holland and on Holland's history. Additionally, with the local ordinances, it also institutes the governing process that the Historic District Commission and then also the historic districts will operate under. So establishing the application process from that all the way to how long do each of these commissioners get to serve in their roles, all of that's decided by the ordinance. And because of this ordinance, because of this local control, the local historic districts provide some of the strongest protections from threats against historic integrity. So as I've mentioned already, if you live in a local historic district, you have to go through an application process and a review in order to make changes to your home. And that doesn't happen on the higher levels. And part of that is because the background of how these 2 districts are established are very different. Let's see. So this application process is called a certificate of appropriateness. And if you live in the historic district, this might be something you're familiar with. It's required for any form of rehabilitation, renovation, alteration, repair, or exterior change on a property. Now, there are some things that don't require a certificate of appropriateness, but at the city, we always say it's best to ask first and make sure what you're doing is approved. So for example, we don't have any oversight over the colors that houses are painted. That's sometimes one that can sometimes be a little bit confusing, but that does not fall under our sort of oversight. These applications are reviewed and approved by the commission, like I mentioned. They meet once a month, usually on the first Tuesday of the month, at a public meeting. So it's open to all of you if you were ever interested in attending and seeing how sort of this side of historic preservation works. And by having this certificate of appropriateness, it's going to guarantee that the work being done on a property is in keeping with the historic nature of the building and of the neighborhood. So we have guidelines that are available to residents of the city to look at that illustrates what sorts of things are appropriate and not appropriate in the district. And they also include resources for where you can do your own research and learn more. We're currently going through an updating sort of process with these guidelines. And they're still currently, our most recent ones are still in a draft form, but I'm very excited to share them in the next couple of months with the public at large, because there's been a lot of work that's gone into them to make them even more easy to understand and helpful for our residents. So in addition to the certificate of appropriateness process, there's also something that we heavily rely on, which are the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. And this was also something I was hoping we'd have as a handout. As I can tell, it's a little tricky to read all the way up there, but that's okay, because I will just talk a little bit about what they're saying. So these standards are put out by the Secretary of the Interior for any project that's falling into the local historic district nominations and with SHPO. So these standards guide our commission on what decisions they make and why they make those decisions. So they might say, I don't know, I think that siding isn't correct for your home. Well, they can't just say that. It has to be backed by one of these standards. And in contrast, they might really like something that you're proposing, but if it goes against one of these standards, they legally cannot support it. Because these are what we must follow. And this is also set forth in the local ordinance that I mentioned earlier. So for example, some of the ones we most often use are standard number 6, which is that deteriorated historic features will be repaired rather than replaced. So that's something that we always like to see, keeping the original, and that if you need to repair, that new feature will match the old in design, color, texture, and how it looks. I'm sure Amy is very familiar with some of these. And then number 9, standard number 9 is that new additions, exterior alterations, or related new construction will not destroy historic materials, features, or spatial relationships, and that the new work will be differentiated from the old, but will be compatible with the historic character of the building. So I think this one is really important because it shows that we don't think that homes should stay static exactly the way they were through time. New additions, alterations, additions, new construction, we like to see that in the historic district. We want to see it growing. We want to see people enjoying and using their homes to the fullest extent. And there's ways that you can do that, that they both complement the original historic structure and add to the neighborhood as a whole. So that's really the goal with these standards, is that there's a place where you can live in a historic home and also not be set back by the functionality of it, if that makes sense. So I'm going to delve a little bit more into this map here, just again to sort of go through what are these different historic districts in Holland. So not every property that is on the National Register is also locally designated. So that's a little bit confusing, but what I mean by that is just because something is on the National Register, it doesn't mean that they are part of the local district and have to go through, for example, that certificate of appropriateness process. And on the flip side of it, we also have a district that's not on the National Register, but is locally designated. So let me show you here. Yes, you'll get a copy. So these are, as this is the same slide we saw earlier, the National Register districts in Holland. So you can see it's a pretty large area. Basically, we're just leaving out that red area there over Washington Boulevard. Yeah. This is 16th right here. Here's 15th. This is Central Avenue right here. Washington over here. 13th right here. So this is the larger National Register district. But what I really want to show you is right here. So this is our district that is on the National Register and locally designated. So the folks who live within this boundary will have to complete things such as COAs and go through that process. So that boundary line, again, is Central Avenue is right here. We have a couple of homes over on the east side of here, but it's mostly west of Central, goes all the way down to 16th here by the old high school. And then the other boundary line is 13th to Washington right there. And so this yellow color, that's the original historic district that was established in 1983 on the National Register. And these sort of sage green ones are the additions that were added back in 1990, including City Hall and the library. My colors are a little bit messed up right there. But so you can see the areas that were added at a later date because it was deemed they too should be protected. And then one additional district that I'll point out is this red one right here. This is the Keppels Village Historic District, which is the newest historic district in Holland, established in 2010. So it's a series of red brick homes, almost identical, right here on Central at 13th. And they are part of the larger National Register designation in the Holland Historic Edition, but they also were made their own separate local district. Okay. So then that leaves the Washington Boulevard Historic District, which is our orange one right over here. This was established in 2001, and it follows mostly Washington Boulevard and then all the way over to Vinralty Avenue over here, stopping after 12th Street along Vinralty. So these homes were also identified as having good historic integrity and historic character, and so were protected. But again, they are not part of that original National Register or on the National Register as of right now. Holland also has 2 single site historic districts. This is a little bit confusing again because they're individual buildings, but of how it's phrased within our ordinances, each individual property is its own historic district. So that includes the city greenhouses, the original ones, which are located on Central near State Street, and also the Vinralty farm home lot and the Vinralty house way out on 16th Street, neither of which you can see on the map I have right here. So I just wanted to quickly go over the differences on how you list a property or a district. I talked a little bit about this earlier, but I think now that we've heard about the differences between the National Register and the local historic district, this might be a little bit helpful. So for the National Register, again, that nomination comes from SHPO through the interests of the private individuals, organizations, local governments. There's an application process that requires a lot of research and survey of the structure, also a lot more of the architectural descriptions. You'll be out there in the snow measuring buildings if we remember that photo from the very beginning. Then that goes to both a state and national review board before you're approved for designation. From the local historic district perspective, there's a lot more sort of small ins and outs and back and forth. It always starts with citizen interest at the grassroots. We listen to all of you. We listen to the people who live here and want to protect the homes that they live in and the homes of their neighbors. And so when we see citizen interest, that prompts the request for a study that goes towards the local government. For us in Holland, that's City Council. They establish a committee. Sometimes that involves members of the Historic District Commission, but it also includes other interested members in our community. And then that committee does a survey, or they assign people to do a survey of the proposed district. And I have a couple of example survey sheets to show you here in just a minute, but this involves photographing the property, finding out when it was built, if anybody important lived there, any defining architectural features on the property, and important information like that. Once all of that's collected, it's then put into a report. And that report is then reviewed by, for us, City Council, and then it's also shared with the State Historic Preservation Office. SHPO provides recommendations, but that final decision on a local district is made by the local government. So primarily, almost everything that happens with these local districts happens right here in our city. And then after the district is approved, it's incorporated into the ordinance and that district is established. If this is another town or community that's looking to start their first historic district, once that district's approved, then it would start the process of creating the ordinance. So there's a couple of different ways to go about this, but here in Holland, we already have one, so it would be added to it. And I mentioned those survey sheets. These are what a couple of them look like. If you're interested in seeing these, I think they have some really fascinating information. All of the survey sheets that have been collected for the City of Holland have been scanned and uploaded to our website, so they can be accessed by anyone. I have the link right there, but the other way to find it is to go to the Historic Preservation page on the Holland City website, and we have a tab called Property Research, and then they're divided up by the districts and by the streets, and you can scroll through and see what everything looks like. But you can see some of the things that I was talking about here. So it includes both the historic name and how we know it today, who owns it at the time when the survey was collected. So this was recorded on November 6th of 1980 for Washington School here. It gives a description of the property, and then it also gives some history on it. So this one is again from 1980. This over here is from the Washington Boulevard district. So this from the mid 90s, and this is the Coatsworth House, which is on the corner of Washington Boulevard and 9th Street there. Something that I think is also really helpful for these surveys are they help us establish districts, but also 30, 40 years from the time they're written, they provide an excellent sort of record of what the property was like at the time of listing. So I'm able to look at these now and say, look, since it was listed, these improvements have been made to the home, or these changes have been made. For the Coatsworth House, for example, it doesn't have the cupola in this photo. That was added after the survey designation. So it just shows both in the photographs and then also in the descriptions, really great detail in how these properties have evolved over time. I will say, as you're reading through them, not everything is accurate. We're always learning more. We're always discovering new things. That's another thing I find. And a lot of these were completed by volunteers at the time, but I still think they're a really cool way to see how historic preservation works within a community like ours. And then to end today, I just want to talk a little bit about those of you who might be living in an older home outside of the district or just outside of the district and interested in historic preservation. Historic preservation is still important even if you're not in one of these protected areas or registered neighborhoods, because it's individual advocates that are important. It's those of you who protect the resources for the future and make them available for other people. So just by seeing all of you here today, that gets me really excited because there's other people who love these old houses just like I do. I also wanted to share, if anyone was interested, some additional resources. First of all, I'm here to talk with anyone, answer any questions that you have. I'm not just available for those in the historic district, but the city as a whole. I mentioned earlier the historic preservation website for the City of Holland. We have some great information there about our districts themselves, the history and how they were established, and then also those survey sheets. And then one more tidbit that I think is interesting are the National Park Service preservation briefs. These are extremely detailed documents that explain some of the best practices for historic preservation, and they can be found on the National Park Service websites. They were originally published individually as issued, and since their original publishing dates, some of which were 25 years ago, they've been updated with more recent information. And I myself, as a preservation professional, reference these a lot when I'm helping homeowners looking to do things on their homes. They have pamphlets about preserving your windows, making your home more energy efficient, choosing accurate paint colors, different things like that. So if you're interested, I highly recommend checking those out. And again, I want to thank you for listening and attending today. This is my information. I also have cards that you can take at the end here. But thank you. And I will pass it either to Linda or to Amy or whoever would like to go next.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you very much. Really a terrific presentation, and note down this number in case you, for any reason, want to get back in touch with Anna Minable. You'll get this in print as well. Somehow we'll make sure that you get there. All right, so I'm really happy to turn this over to Amy Aldrich, who's going to pick up and tell you more about her work in working with historic houses of Holland in renovations and updates for resale.
Thank you. As we're getting this presentation switched over from one computer to another, maybe a show of hands. Is there anybody who currently lives in the historic district or has in their past? Nobody? No. So nobody has gone through this process of the renovations, right? No. No. All right. There are a couple of people who attend churches in the historic district. So. All right. So as Linda mentioned, I am from an organization called HomeCore, and it's a nonprofit that was set up in 1997. It was founded by Gordon Van Wylen, who is a past president of Hope College, and other business leaders who, as Linda explained, when the downtown Holland area was being revitalized, knew that the housing around the business district needed to stay strong in order for the people to want to visit downtown and invest in the neighborhoods around it. So they set up this nonprofit called HomeCore. And what HomeCore does is there's two main things that we do. One is we give grants to homeowners. This is what we've done since 1997 when we were started. And the reason that we were started was the city set up their program, which was called the R Street program. And that gave grants to homeowners to help fix the big things. So the roofs, the windows, the siding, those big things. Being a government program with government funding, there of course were a lot of boxes to tick to make sure that you met the qualifications of those. And we found a lot of homeowners had something that just made them slip through the cracks. So if the city's Our Street program at the time could put $3,000 towards a roof that didn't necessarily make the roof get replaced because it was a $6,000 roof and the income constrained homeowner did not have that additional $3,000. So HomeCore is privately funded, meaning we accept donations from individuals and companies, not government funds, so that we can be more flexible. So often the homeowners that we run into from 1997 to today are employed. They've lived in their home for decades. Something happens that means that their income is affected. So they have health issues, they have a pandemic, they have something all at the same time that their roof starts leaking, or something big needs to happen with their whole house. So we step in and we give small grants, anywhere from $50 to help them fix a storm door to $3,000 is typically our maximum grant amount. So grants is the thing that we've been doing since 1997. When I joined the HomeCore board in 2004-ish, we had the exciting opportunity of 2007, 2008, having this huge housing recession. So we had all of these bank-owned homes that, because I was a licensed builder, the board thought, let's just try buying one of these, renovating it and trying to sell it and see what happens. So we did that just kind of one at a time. In 2007 is when we started that. And then had donors who came to us and said, we'd like you to do more of that. So about 7 years ago is when we stepped up our efforts. And instead of just doing one at a time, our goal is to complete 10 homes per year. Jubilee is a partner of ours. We're separate organizations, but we raise money together and identify houses to determine which one is a better fit for which organization. So they do a similar thing. And I know a lot of people get us confused, but Jubilee and Home Core, we work together very well, but we are separate organizations. So grants, renovations are the two things that we do. And by renovations, I mean, these are the homes that we buy, renovate, and sell. The grants are when we give money to homeowners to help them fix their own homes. So then just backing up a little bit about me, I'm a Calvin College graduate. I majored in Latin and biology, and then decided to go back and work for my family's construction company until I figured out what my real job should be. And now it's quite a few decades later and it's still my real job and I love it. So I've been a licensed builder since 2000. My family business was always new construction. So my dad, my brothers, I did not appreciate historic old homes. I would say the first 5 years that I did this, I'd show my dad around just for the fun of it. And he'd, I think, walk through about every single house and just ask when the bulldozer was going to show up. So I would say that our family did not appreciate new homes, or sorry, old homes. So my dad, being a builder, surprisingly was not handy at all. So about every 4 years when he had to start touching up or take out a caulk gun to recalc, he just decided it was time to move. So we moved about every 4 years and just built a new house. So the love of old homes and historic properties is, I'd say, something new for me. So our grants, I haven't updated this map in a while, but this gives you an idea of our boundaries, which you'll see looks pretty similar to Anna's map. The little red dots just represent the grants that we've given to homeowners over the past 3 years. And again, it's up to $3,000. We typically award between 40 and 60 grants per year for people. So now talking about what I'm going to cover the rest of the time, and a lot of it in pictures, are given that Home Core works in historic districts and not historic districts, but old home areas. What do today's buyers want, and what design challenges and opportunities do we see? So today's buyers, they want closets, they want storage. Master suites are, of course, popular. So a master bedroom with a bathroom attached to it. People like garages. Energy efficiency is always a good thing. Open floor plans, and of course, tastes change. So I would say the pendulum has started to swing back, that people do like a little bit smaller spaces, cozier spaces than they did maybe in the early 2000s. But people do still like open floor plans versus little doorways, little stairways. They like high-end finishes if they can afford them, and they like, of course, the old home charm. That's why they're choosing this area in these neighborhoods. So looking at that list and then thinking of the old homes that you have been in or maybe live in or ever lived in, not much on that list applies to some homes that were built in the early 1900s. So most of the homes that Home Core does were built between 1900 and 1930, I would say. So looking at an example, 205 West 13th is just west of St. Francis de Sales Church on the corner of Maple and 13th. So this was a home that we bought a few years ago at a auction that was bank owned. So it had been vacant for a number of years. This home does fall in the historic district, the Washington Avenue Boulevard Historic District. So we were able to restore the wood windows and the existing garage. We opened up the floor plan a little bit. Lots of paint on the exterior, and then opening up the stairway. Oh, creating a master floor. So some of those pictures. So here's a side-by-side before and after. So the light yellow house on the left, in case you can't tell, is the before. Hopefully you can tell. Otherwise, that was a whole lot of money wasted. So you'll see the front porch posts are these black metal in the before picture that there must have been a really good salesperson in the 70s or whenever that was, because there are a lot of houses that have those black metal porch posts with the curly things. And then you'll see that there's aluminum storm windows on the house. When you compare that to the house on the right, the after, you'll see that we replaced those porch posts and we took the storm windows off. But otherwise, it's all restoration of the existing windows that were there and a lot of paint. A new roof, but the roof was replacing kind of like with like, so we're allowed to do that. The rest required approval as far as the porch posts and the, well, really for this picture, it was just the porch posts. This was the garage, which the picture doesn't quite do it justice, but it had a severe lean to it. But we knew that if we tore it down, it would be expensive and hard to get approval to build something that would fit in the price range that we knew we needed to sell the house in. So we were allowed to replace the garage door because you could see that that garage door that's there was not historic anything. So lots of paint and a replaced garage door. Some more before and afters. The picture on your left is the before. So this was the only bathroom in the house. So there's a clawfoot tub surrounded by a do-it-yourself or fiberglass wall. So we were able to reconfigure some space and add a master bedroom on the main floor with a master bath. So if you look at the picture on the right, in the upper right of that picture is the entrance into the master bedroom. And then that bath in the bottom corner is the new bath. And then here's an example of kind of a before, during, and after. So when I say people like an open floor plan, it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be completely open, no walls whatsoever. But if you look at the picture on your left, the chandelier with the stairway in the back, and compare it to the upper right picture, the stairs themselves, as far as the treads and the risers that you would walk up, those did not change, but just, or the width of the stairway did not change, but just opening it up with a beam to give a little more feeling of space and daylight just really helped that space. So the bottom right picture shows that kind of in process of putting that structural element in place of a beam. So these interior renovations do not require any sort of approval from the historic committee. So this is, of course, involves building approvals, permitting, but we do not need any approvals to alter the interior of the home. Contrasting, so that was in the historic district. Central Commons was another project that we did in partnership with Jubilee, and this is on the corner of Central and 16th Street. So we bought 4 homes. 3 of them were 2-family, so they were split into 2 apartments. And then on the corner was a single family home. So HomeCore, we took the 3 homes and we renovated them. Jubilee took over the corner. They tore down the house and they built the 6 tiny houses that you see there today. So if you can picture the corner, 16th and Central, what direction is that? South? east. Okay, so we were able to kind of rework that corner. It had been an eyesore for a number of decades, I would say, and it was a loss leader for us. So we lost a whole bunch of money, but we had donors who were willing to support that to make that a better place. So here's an example of one of those houses. This is the furthest east on that property. So the house on the left shows the before, and the after is the blue house. So this is an old house, but it's not in the historic district. So the blue is new vinyl siding. There's new posts on the front porch, new railings, new vinyl windows. So new materials that you would not be allowed or encouraged to use in the historic district, but we were able to use here. And then the back of the home shows on the right that we added a new garage. It's kind of hard to see, but it is detached. So there's about 6 feet between the back of the house and the new garage. But we reworked the site. So instead of having driveways between each of the homes, we put in a new kind of alley that services the homes. So the garage is to the back that you really can't see it from the road, and it's serviced from the back alley. So again, as Anna said, the historic district is not against updating houses so that they're livable and what people want to, because of course they want a vibrant living district just like we all do. But there are additional rules and things that you have to follow that make things more expensive in a lot of cases. Here's some after pictures of that same house, just showing again a stairway that is less closed in, more open, more light. Anytime we run into brick and expose a brick chimney during demo, we tend to leave it exposed just as a little bit of character. So this was a brick chimney that went through a kitchen on the main floor and then the bathroom on the second floor. And then another house, just the next house over, or sorry, 2 houses over. Again, converted it from a 2-family house to a 1-family house. All the new stuff again, vinyl siding, vinyl windows, new garage, and open floor plan. So the before shows that it was a lot. And living, if you're in the historic district, they would most likely want you to see that siding repaired. And in a lot of historic districts or homes in the historic district, that siding has been lovingly cared for and painted every 6 to 10 years. This is not the case with this home or with some houses. And so it just makes that more challenging to do. So being able to just cover it up with siding was a good thing, I feel like, for this home, because these were not $400,000 homes. They were 180 to 200. So being able to build a new garage, make it a home that somebody wanted to live in for a relatively affordable price, it was important to be able to do some of these lower cost things. So design challenges and opportunities. So again, this was a house on the back of a house on 13th Street that when we took it over, and the windows on the right, the wood windows, this is a lot of what we run into. Again, not lovingly cared for. They've been kind of abandoned and neglected, and windows painted shut and broken and all of these things. So this was a first that I've seen many things, but I had never seen carpet as a molding for a casing around a door. So I had to document that. Yeah, this is when my dad would say, when does the bulldozer show up? So you'll see there's paneling on every wall. There's a dropped ceiling on every ceiling. There's carpet covering every surface, not even just the floors, but the trim as well. And I never take the paneling off, the ceiling down and think, why'd they put this up? This wall is perfect. What we find is we take the paneling off and it looks like this. So they most often put it up for a reason, that the plaster was crumbling, things were happening. It was easier to run wiring or whatever in the ceiling and just cover it up with acoustical tiles. So unfortunately, I never seem to remove things and just say, oh, it just needs a little paint and we're good to go. So another example is a basement that in a house that we bought from foreclosure had this, I don't even know what it was. It was a very soft board. So it held in lots of fun smells. So that was covering the basement walls. When we took it off, we found that. So it's a crumbling brick foundation that was actually allowing the dirt to pour in during rainstorms. So that's my son. So if you're one of my 3 children, you get to do some of these glamorous jobs like filling a bucket up with dirt and hauling it up a stairway as your summer job. So if anyone would like to volunteer, I'll get you my information because they're getting older and more resistant to my rules. Here's another example of something that somebody may like, old home charm, but only to a certain extent. So on the left is the trap door that allowed you to access your basement. So it was a full height basement that would be great for storage, but I don't think anybody really wants to open a trap door to go down there. So on the right is the reframing that we did to accommodate that. And you can see in an ideal world, that picture on the right, you wouldn't have a stairway that butted right up against a window because the stairway literally is touching the window. But in order to keep the historic, this was in the historic district, it's right by the library, but to not make any exterior changes and get rid of that window, it was just easier just to make it a little funky. And I think people are tolerant of that, that you can fix it with some design element that kind of just, it is what it is. So here's some examples of things that when we see, we just are very excited because again, these are not very high-end homes. These are at the time 200 and below. So when you see a stairway like this or a front of a home that has all of this detail in the original wood, it's just pretty cool and exciting to be able to keep that and restore it. The stained glass windows in that upper right picture. So those are things that are very hard to duplicate now, or they're easy to duplicate when you have a very high budget. But to be able to see those things in these old homes is pretty exciting. Wood floors, it seems like even if they're very rustic, like the pictures on the right, it seems like they're always worth restoring. So even if they're a very rough pine, people like to have the original wood sanded and refinished and reuse those. This is an example of me sometimes trying too hard to reuse things. So bricks, we always run into some, and I'll end up moving them, or my sons will actually, from house to house to house. And then we finally find some way to use them. So it might be just a little walkway or a little fire pit or something, but I'm intent on using them. And I probably spent way too much time and money to reuse them, but you just can't throw them away. Like doors. I I have moved so many doors. I just, yeah. In fact, this fall, I sent a picture to my son who's at in college and just sent him a picture of doors and said it was moving day. And he replied that he never wanted to see another door in his life, another old door, because I have made him move so many around. So doors are another thing that it seems like when you're opening up floor plans, so you're getting rid of a room and opening it up, all of a sudden you have an extra door, or somebody left a couple extra doors in their basement and now I inherited them and I can't bring myself to get rid of them, because as soon as I do get rid of them, I actually need them. So I do sometimes now, because I don't have a good storage place, send them to Habitat for Humanity. And then I end up buying them back a few months later. So it's a fun circle. So here's another example is the piano. So this, I think 1 out of 5 homes has a piano left behind that we have. And let me tell you, nobody wants a piano. So no matter how good of condition it is, none of the resale or donation places will take them, even if you volunteer to drop it off. No piano places want them. You can list it for free on Facebook, Craigslist, eBay, everywhere, and nobody will take it. So this shows the upper left where the piano started. And then we needed to work in that room, so we moved it to another room in the bottom left. And then we needed to work in that room, so we moved it to another room and we used it as a tool bench. And then the bottom right shows the new kitchen cabinets are in, the kitchen is almost done, the house is almost done, and the piano is still there. So again, kept moving it around. I think it visited every room in this house, waiting for somebody to say they'd want it. And then it eventually got chopped up and put in the dumpster. So I know, I'm sorry, it hurts, but I really did not have any plans. So if anyone has any ideas on what to do with old pianos, I'd love to hear them afterwards. Here's just a little cartoon to end things of, yes, why would someone throw away this perfectly good trash? And that's all that I have. Thanks. And yeah, we have plenty of time for questions. We have 2. Or Anna and I can share one.
1, 2, 3.
Okay.
So are we good? And then maybe we should turn on one light for a little bit of light here now. We'll keep the screen up though in case we need it. All right. So yes, questions. All right. Maybe now, do I need to give the person the microphone for questions for
Yes.
online? I think I do. Yeah. Okay.
And I have a few questions in the chat as well after you're done.
Have you noticed a difference in appreciation or knowledge since so many home decorating programs are on TV? More of an appreciation for fixing up an old home rather than tearing them down today. Has that affected your work at all? This plethora of programs on TV about decorating and preserving.
Yes, I would say that everybody is much more knowledgeable about things that can and cannot be done in an old home. I wish budgets were a little more realistic on the shows that you see, because yeah, a lot of the time they're showing a whole lot of work for not as much as it actually costs. But yeah.
See, that would be a problem.
Somebody had asked earlier in the presentation, what does informational designation mean?
That's a great question. Take my mask off here.
Yeah, presenters don't need a mask. Yay.
So informational designation means that for the state register of historic sites, there's a sign, a historic marker in place that's representing an event usually that happened in history, but not a specific building. So for example, there's a sign in Centennial Park about the first Dutch settlers. That's not because we have one of the first Dutch settlers right there. It's just a great part of our town to have that sign to talk about that history. So that's what informational designation means. It's not for the property itself, but for the idea that's represented there. So, good question.
Do we have any ballpark idea how many homes are in a historic district, in one of those districts that we saw? It would be hundreds, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so there are 380 homes in the National Register historic districts, and there's an additional just under, I'd say 200 in the Washington Boulevard, maybe 175. So we're looking at about 500 homes.
500. And what of those, how many are, would you say, roughly downtown in the districts we're looking at here?
All of them are
They
in
would
the
all
districts.
be in the districts
Mhm.
that we just saw.
Yes.
Okay.
We have another question in the chat. What are examples of projects that grants might cover? And you might have already answered that.
Yeah, the home core funds cover major exterior things. So roofs, siding, windows, also health and safety things like unsafe electrical or plumbing that just doesn't work, or a furnace that doesn't work. So every year we replace a couple of furnaces. We replace a couple of sewer lines to the street that have become unusable. So we are not funding new countertops for a kitchen or new carpet or things that cannot be seen or are not necessary for kind of safety and health. And then we also help with usually a couple of grants per year to make a home more accessible. So if they need a bathroom modified to help with accessibility issues. And that, I should say, it also follows closely with the city's program. So the city still has their home repair program, which replaced the R Street program. So a lot of the time we're partnering with the city that the city can put in $5,000, we can put in $3,000 and make the homeowner always puts in a certain amount as well. So then the project can proceed.
So does the homeowner have to be income compromised? It's for a certain income level that the home has to be approved for the project, and the person has to be approved as being in the income category where they need the grant or whatever you want to
Yes,
say.
it is income qualified, but as I mentioned, our funds are pretty flexible. So we can take into consideration if somebody just had a real rough year, rough circumstances, and needs something to happen right away, we can be more flexible than funds that may be tied to government grants. And then we do have three types of grants that are not as dependent on income because they're meant as more of just a stimulus. So we have a curb appeal grant that is just $1,000, and it requires a match of at least 1-to-1. So if a homeowner wants to upgrade their front porch, we'll just help them in a little way with that. Same with energy efficiency grants. And I just drew a blank on the third one. Wheelchair ramps. So,
Oh, uh-huh.
so.
I wondered how many of these 500 or so homes are owned by like an absentee landlord sort of situation where they're rented to people. I moved from Minnesota this springtime. In our town, we had some trouble with that, where people would have these beautiful homes and they let them go, so badly because the renters didn't take care of them. And I was just curious, do you have any mechanism, because they're in a district, to do anything to up that care?
I'll speak to this in one aspect and then Anna can address it as well. But working in the city, and working with homeowners, I find that a lot of the time, many of the poorly maintained homes are owner occupied versus landlord situations. just because the city does have a rental program that requires inspections every 3 years or 6 years. So they do have minimum standards that need to be met as far as peeling paint, windows, that kind of thing. Those standards are the same whether you're a landlord or a homeowner, but it usually doesn't become an issue with a homeowner because they're not getting regularly inspected. So if you are a homeowner owned home, it relies on kind of a neighbor complaining about it. If you're a landlord, you're getting an inspection every couple of years. So I wouldn't necessarily say that the houses I see are worse because they're landlord owned than homeowner.
Yeah, and Amy said basically what I was going to say there as well. We do have landlord-owned properties in the historic district, but because they are inspected on a fairly regular basis, usually any troubles that come up end up being fixed. I've seen a couple of them again come to the commission where it's that way. I don't have any quantifiable numbers right now of how many homes in the district are owner occupied versus landlords. But you know, they are there. There's just, again, some things in place that help sort of mitigate any possible risk.
If the homeowner does some renovations that are approved, you know, for the situation, does the state or the city offer tax relief for a period of time? I know we had a historic home in Minnesota, and that's why I was curious. They did give some over a period of time, lessen the tax, because often the property taxes are quite high in these districts if you fix up your home. I mean, you know, it makes people not want to put that kind of money into it. If, you know, I'm just curious.
Yeah, so we don't have a program like that at the city level or really at the state level. In the next couple of months, there will be a new state historic tax credit program starting, but that's going to be a income tax credit very similar to the federal government one. So it's not exactly in the way that you're talking about. Yeah, no, it sounds nice.
So for clarification to her question, if you had a $250,000 house and you put in $100,000, does the city come back and say, rather than continuing on that X% per year because you own it, we'll jack it up to 350,000 basis to start your tax?
Well, the state of Michigan, I forgot what year it was, but our proposal A locked in taxable value so that no matter how much money you put into your home, it can only increase by a maximum of, I think it's 3% annually. So there are protections. As soon as you would sell the home and a new owner takes over, then they would take over at the new estimated tax value. But no matter how much money you put into your home in the city of Holland or the state of Michigan, your taxes are protected, or your taxable value is protected. Yes, whether it's a historic home, a brand new home, a piece of vacant land, anything. So on your tax bill, you have your SCV, your state equalized value that your tax is based on. And then you have your, what's the other number? The taxable value, which is different. So one is what the property is estimated to be worth, but that's different than what it's taxed on because it's taxed on the lower amount as far as what you bought it at an incremental percentage increase every year or decrease if the market goes down.
Wow, that is a tremendous incentive for people to continue to own what it is that they improved. To stay there, not just do it like as a flip. You're not just doing it as a flip because the taxes will flip up when you do that.
So if you do a big renovation, the city tax assessor will want to come through and assess it at the new value, but your taxes do not increase to that new value. It's just increased so that they know that the value went up, and if it ever changes hands, it's
Okay.
uncapped.
I have a question in the chat. Are there any plans for the Keppel Village homes? Some are in disrepair, but are very interesting and could be very charming.
Yes, so that would involve the individuals who own the homes coming forward with the proposals on what they would like to do on the exteriors of the properties. At this time, right now, I'm not working with anyone directly in the Keppels Village Historic District. And again, so it kind of falls onto the homeowner themselves to go forward. We, the Historic District Commission and myself in my role at the city can't go to a house and say, hey, you need to repair this because this doesn't meet our guidelines. When we become involved, when the homeowner initiates the process. So that's also something to keep in mind, that you might see things in the historic district and go, that doesn't seem right. But as long as the homeowner isn't going to change anything, or once they start changing something, that's where we become involved. So hopefully that explained that a little bit.
Okay. Now to elaborate on what was just said, those of you who would like to take your map in hand and cruise around Holland and see some of these locations, this different colored map that's going around is the one that we are going to copy for everyone with the colors on it. But I mean, even right away, we'll have copies of this in the HASP office that you can pick up if they're not circulated today. Because I think you'd like to have the color coding, and you may not have color printing at your home. Is that a problem? You don't have color printing at home? Because it'll be online too. You'll receive the map in an email, including the people who are here, physically here today. But you can also very soon have a copy of that colored map because the house numbers are on it and everything. And then in addition, if you go to the Home Corps website, there will be a list, correct, of the homes that have been renovated, and you can develop your own property list of what you'd like to drive around and see, right?
So, yeah, so on the Home Corps website, which is homecor.org, we do have all of our past and current renovations on there and before and after pictures. So it is not just a list, but it's the address with some pictures for all of them. And I should mention that, so when we started this 7 years ago, I just closed on our 50th house Friday. So we just sold our 50th. So yeah, so I think all 50 of those are on there.
And I've heard Amy say in the past that they do try to look for the dog of the neighborhood. They try to get the worst house, make a flip to the, like if you change the worst house to the best house, you've had maximum impact on everybody around them. And everybody around it says, oh, wow, I could do that. And that's what this is all, that it lifts the whole neighborhood. I've heard Amy say that they favor corner houses because they have visibility from both sides sometimes. So a little bit more discussion of what makes Home Corps choose a certain house.
Yeah, I was just going to say, because I didn't say that in my presentation, is that we don't want to compete with the investor or homeowner. So somebody who can buy a home, move right in, somebody who can buy a home, do a little renovation and move in. We're not trying to compete with that person who can make money doing this. That's why we're a nonprofit. So our business plan that we sold to our investors and donors was that our goal is to lose less than $10,000 per house. And I'm not supposed to use the word lose. I'm supposed to say we're supposed to invest less than $10,000 per house.
But you get the idea.
But you get the idea. So we, yes, try to lose less than 10,000. So we take the homes that just don't make sense for somebody else to do. So they have the basements like you saw in the picture, that's a $50,000 repair to have a basement like that. Yeah, so that's our goal.
I was just wondering, are you having difficulty finding houses now that the real estate market has gone up so much?
Yes. Yep. And that's okay. So we don't need to compete to try to buy homes that a homeowner can buy. So we just closed that house Friday and I don't have anything new to work on right now. So I don't know what I'm going to do with my time, but yes, we are having a hard time buying homes.
But were there times in the real estate market in the past, since you started working with Home Corps, when there were really a lot to choose from and it was like riches from your point of view?
Yeah. So when we started this during the recession, we bought a house from a bank for $7,000. And it wasn't a house that people lived in. It was called the Sinners Motorcycle Club. And it was on 16th Street, just west of Lincoln. So just west of the railroad tracks. So that was our first house. And we renovated it, put a ton of work and money into it. And I think we sold it for $70-some thousand. And that was hard at the time. Like it was a tough sell. So we could have bought, 50 houses that year for under $20,000. But no matter how nice we made them, we still would not have been able to sell them. So that's the problem and the blessing, I guess, all in one is right now it's hard to buy a home. It'd be really easy to sell it. And we have had a really easy time selling houses the last 18 months, but it's hard to buy them.
Okay, we are out of time for today. And so if you'll be thinking about questions you'd like to ask for next week, and if many of you would like to cruise around Holland now looking at some of these addresses as a curbside, tour. And so you would use the map that we're going to distribute to you. That was the colored map has the house numbers on it. This map will be available either coming to you as an email or some hard copies if that's what you need for you to pick up in the HASP office. I'm just speaking here off the cuff, but that.
Yeah, during class, I sent out an email to everyone in the classroom with this as an attachment, and then I will request from Print Services that they give us a nice color copy each. So they'll be available next Monday prior to this class.
Because the house numbers are on here, so you can develop your own list, and then you can go to the Home Corps website and look at their pictures and I want to see that one, and set up your own little tour with your buddy who's going to read the map while you drive around or whatever you're going to do. This is a do-it-yourself kind of curbside investigation opportunity as you look at some of these in person and look at the neighborhood they're in and so forth. Now for next week, we will, I don't know if you're going to have a new set of homes next week or if we're going to go in more detail over the ones that we've looked at. But if you have a specific home that you're curious about and it turns up on the map or something, get your questions ready for Amy for next week. And any questions that you have, you could even email in if you want that covered. All right. Are there any other questions about how to use this map, which you'll have in your email soon, or you already do? This email can go out right away to everybody who's in class, right?
Yeah, it has already been sent.
Okay, good. You already have it. The numbers are small, but you can see them.
Yeah.
And you can see which historic district they're in and see which are on the national and local historic register. So you can develop your questions for next week. And if you have specific questions, bring them next week and we'll go on with our exploration of the humble homes of Holland.
So let's go ahead and thank our presenters, Anna and Amy. Thank you so much. And for everybody at home, I'm going to go ahead and close the class. Thank you for joining us.
Terrific job.